Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the global webinar series on cybersecurity. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Vaddi Venkateshwar Rao, Scientist D, Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, Government of India. He will be discussing and speaking about web application security, attacks, and countermeasures. Mr. Rao, the session is yours now.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sivaram Krishnan sir, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for the organizers. So my name is Venkateshwar Rao. I am working in Indian Computer Emergency Response Team. So I have 12 plus years of experience in cybersecurity area. So our primary work area is incident response. So we are the national nodal agency responding to computer security incidents as and when we receive. We provide response to all sorts of organizations, including government, private, and citizens, and various critical sector organizations as well. So my areas of focus are, so currently I'm working in IoT security as well. I am a certified web application penetration tester, and this is my brief profile. So now I'm going to jump into our this session. So today I'm going to discuss about web application security and the important the security and the importance of securing web applications, and what are the countermeasures need to be followed, and what are the various kind of vulnerabilities and how they are get exploited, and as a developer responsibility, how they can prevent these kind of attacks. So about all these things I will discuss today. So in this, so I'm showing some examples, and what are the content I'm showing here, and the scripts or commands. So these are all for education and awareness purpose, and so I request all of you to do not try or experiment these commands or scripts on any live websites or web servers or systems, because without any permission and running any scripts or commands on any live website or live systems, it's not legal and it's a crime. And you can just play with all these things by setting up your own test environment and experiment the commands. And coming to the agenda, so I will give a brief introduction about the web application and what are the various components involved in this, and why we need to secure the website, and what are the various attacks and its impact. And I will discuss about top web application vulnerabilities and the procedure for setting up test environment. And in this, these are all very basic definitions, so you might already know about these things. But still, I would like to recall all these things because we are going to discuss. We are going very frequently use these terms throughout our presentation. So in this World Wide Web, so it's a interlinked hypertext documents accessed via the internet. So these documents also called as web pages. These pages contains text, images, videos, and multimedia, and anybody can navigate in between these documents through hyperlinks. And web application, coming to web application, so it is an application accessed over the network, either internet or intranet. So this web application security is a branch of information security that deals with specifically with the security of websites and web applications. And coming to the web client, so here the web client is simply you can just say a browser. So it's a computer application which is used to access the web pages located on the server over the internet. And web server, so it's a combination of hardware and software applications which will store the web pages and serve to the clients whenever any request through the internet. And communication protocol in this for performing communication between the client and web client and web server, there is a set of some rules and some formats for exchanging these messages are there. So by combining all these things, so there are some certain defined protocols are there. So those protocols we'll see very briefly. So in this way the web works. So web pages are accessed from client machine by requesting to the server, and the server will process the request and send the desired data or content in the form of response. And HTTP protocol. Hypertext Transfer Protocol is a communication protocol for transfer of information on the internet and the World Wide Web. The original purpose is to provide a way to publish and retrieve hypertext pages for the internet. So the client PC having a certain IP address and server also having a certain IP address, and that IP address is mapped with some domain name and where all the pages are located. And the client will send the request, and the server will receive that request and process it and send the required result in the form of response. And in this HTTP, there are several different kind of requests are there. One is a popular request is a GET request. In this GET request, the whatever the data sending in the request will be encoded in the URL. And this is the most common HTTP method used in many web applications. And for retrieving information and whatever the actions the server will send the message, that will also be visible on the URL. So usually parameters are very visible on the address bar. So if you see one GET request, so you can see in that. So some example site, and one in the search page we are sending one value as a cat ID as 1. So that is clearly visible on the URL. And coming to HTTP post request, in this kind of post request, data is included in the body of the request instead of encoded in the URL. And in this kind of method is used whenever any confidential transaction or confidential communication is going on, and the data should not be visible to the others. In such kind of case, this kind of request is very popular, and nowadays most of the web applications are using this kind of post request for performing transactions, processing requests and responses. But still, this post request can still visible by capturing the packets or by viewing the source code. So, and these requests can still intercept and modify by using some interpreters for interceptors. And if you see the header with post request, so the page is displayed such.php in some example site, and the parameter for the variable is applied in the body of the request, cat ID. And other popular methods are put request, use it to upload a file from client to server web root. And the delete method is also there, and use it to delete or remove a file from server web root. And trace is another method. Use it to identify the architecture of the application. It will give the trace of the entire the request. And connect for connecting, creating a proxy tunnel communication. This connect method is used. But this option displayed various HTTP methods enabled on the server. And head, it will display the HTTP header, the packet header, request header. It will show that. So these are all methods, but these are all generally not enabled in any of the configurations. So why we need to secure these web applications? Because these web applications are the powerful platform now for any application delivery, and this is a public face for any organization to showcase their services and businesses. And if and this web application got hacked or defaced or something happened to this, the organization may lose their reputation and their customer base. So in the case of any security breaches, and most of the cases, these web applications also contain sensitive data, and it is holding personal identifiable information, transaction details, and various other confidential data, which is need to be protected from unauthorized access. So, and with the rise in this web application usage, and the rise of vulnerabilities also increased due to poor coding practices and other misconfigurations and all. So with these vulnerabilities, many incidents are happening. So we are also seeing very regularly the web application attacks and all. So hacking attempts and website hacks or defacements or data breaches. And another important factor is sometimes if the web application is compromised by some miscreant, and it may become some launchpad for launching other attacks as well. So to prevent this kind of thing also, the organization has to protect their web application. So, and in order to protect their backend network as well, once some miscreant or a malicious person having access to their web application, then he may also get access to their backend network as well. To prevent all these issues and incidents, so the concerned organization or the owner or the web application who is running, so need to protect the application with necessary measures. And these are various top web application vulnerabilities. OWASP is one of the open source web application security project. So they regularly update the various web application security issues, vulnerabilities, and what are the top vulnerabilities in applications in currently observed. So in this injection flaws, broken authentication and session management, cross-site scripting, broken access control, security misconfiguration, sensitive data exposure, cross-site request forgery. So using components with known vulnerabilities, unvalidated redirects and forwards, insufficient logging and monitoring. These are the various top web application vulnerabilities uh, recently published by the community. So now I am going to discuss about each one and what are the that vulnerability is and what are the impact with that vulnerability, how attackers are going to exploit this vulnerability. So coming to injection flaws such as SQL, NoSQL, or operating system, or lightweight directory access protocol injection. This occurs when untrusted data is sent to an interpreter as part of the command or query. So this attacker's hostile data can trick the interpreter into executing unintended commands or accessing data without proper authorization. So in this, there are three different kind of injection flaws are there. So one is command injection, then code injection, and third one is SQL injection. In this, the attack vector is almost any kind of data source can be an injection vector, like environment variables, parameters used in the web application, and external and internal web services which are utilizing in the development of web application, and all types of users who are having access to that web application. This injection flaw occurs when an attacker can send hostile data to an interpreter. Interpreter in the sense, so if I am I am a client. I am sending some input data in the form of web application, like suppose login form. If you see login form, in that for authenticating myself, I need to give my username and password to the that form, login form. Then that request will be submitted to the server. Then server will process that and authenticate and give the response back to me. So in that way, this while submitting this data to the interpreter, interpreter will process. In that case, if the hostile data is submitted, the interpreter will also process hostile data as well if the web application is not properly secured at the time of development. In this, these injection flaws are very prevalent, particularly in legacy code. So the injection vulnerabilities are often found in this SQL and lightweight directory access protocol, XPath, and NoSQL, these queries or operating system commands. So these are all that SMTP headers, expression languages, and some other query languages. This injection flaws can be easily discovered when examining code. Scammers and fudgers can help attackers find these injection flaws. Attackers will use this automatic scanning tools and fuzzing tools to identify these kind of flaws in the web application. And thereafter, so in the reconnaissance phase, the attackers will identify, discover these vulnerabilities exist in the application, and later they will plan their exploitation methods. And coming to this command injection, in this command injection, in this category, the attacker mainly targets on the underlying operating system of the web server. If the web server is running the Microsoft Windows server or Linux server, any operating system, accordingly, by knowing the configuration details and the banner details, the attacker can easily know by using any of the web spidering tools. So with that, attacker can easily identify what the operating system is running behind this, and accordingly he will plan the attacks or commands for execution. So just I'm saying a simple example. In this, if you see any login page, in that, let us assume username and password is there. In that username field, something he is giving, and in password field something else he is giving. In that, so he is just trying to satisfy the SQL query where username and password is taking as a parameters. In that, he is just simply quoting some password, some random password. After that, ending that query and adding another query like some command rm-rf /. This command is a command used in the Linux operating system to remove the entire root directory, the entire directory in the Linux operating system. If this input is not properly handled by the web application code, then interpreter will execute this command. In similar way, we are etc/passwd. This is another command which edits the passwd file in the Linux operating system. That passwd file stores all users and associated passwords in hash values. So this will disclose the sensitive information to the attacker. So coming to code injection in this, the attacker targets the application or web browser, and he is trying to inject some code so into the server or into the database, or trying to display some by executing some code to the browser. In this simple example, that script alert some message and ending the script. If I am giving this small script in any of the form value, so then this code will be executed in the form of alert message. In similar way, I can redirect this application to some other website, which may be a evil site which contains some malware or some malicious codes. So these values are given in the form parameters, and the interpreter will take that value by submitting that request, then interpreter will process it. So this is the code injection. And coming to SQL injection, in that you already know about this SQL, the structured query language for managing databases and performing all data of the tables database creation. So management for managing all the tables for creation of data, modifying the data, deletion of data. For doing all these things, so we have certain defined SQL statements. So the SQL backend database server will execute these commands by after taking from the web server. So in this, the backend database is targeted by the attacker, so which is running in the web application. So the attacker can create user or modify transactions, change records, and port scan internal network also by using this SQL injection attacks. So if you see this example which is displaying here, select start from users where name equal to username. Here username is a user supplied input. The web application form will take this user input from the user supplying in the form, and it will process and it will send to the database server for fetching the required data and give it to the client or user. In that, you can the attacker can try to manipulate this query and make it is ever success query. So in the username parameter, he will in that parameter he will add the string single quote or single quote one in single quote equal to another one in single quote to make it ever success query. So here in the username field, so he will close the bracket and with the blank value, then he is making our condition where 1 equal to 1 it is always satisfied. So in the R condition, any one of the condition is satisfied, then the query will be success and the result will be given to the user. And other scenarios are also there. So in where that some string SQL query in that untrusted data is constructed in the query and concatenated in the query. So request.get parameter ID. Here ID is the value supplied by the user. So after this value submission, then the query will be executed. In the similar way, Hibernate query language is another kind of the structured query language. So in this also create a query from accounts where customer ID. So request.get parameter that ID. So attacker will target this area and plan his attacks accordingly by making the query success by using any one of the logical operators or Boolean operators and some other defined built-in constructs in the SQL. So these are the various countermeasures for this injection flash. So in this, the developer should never call the operating system commands from application layer code. So if he is trying to call any operating system commands, definitely that there is a high chances are there to get exploited. So and whatever the input supplied by the user should be sanitized or validated before interpreting that code by the server. And these, instead of directly processing the SQL statements or the other given values concatenating into the statement, using of API specially designed for processing these requests and some prepared statements with some parameterized queries and stored procedures is a preferable option for developers. So for using in processing these SQL statements and queries. So and whitelisting of characters. So special characters are some codes or some commands, OS commands, and some shell scripts. So this is all called as input validation techniques. So whitelisting of all these So which are parameters or which values are not acceptable for the interpreter, there is some security risk. So escaping all user supply input. So if user is giving any such kind of input which contains some operating system commands or some other scripting commands or some codes, so that can be escaped by using some escaping mechanisms in the available in the HTML and JavaScript and cascading style sheets. In that, several escaping codes are there, like for ampersand AB something, some codes are used. So by using these codes, so the user data input can be escaped and in the development process, and they can mitigate these injection flaws by using all these countermeasures. And those actions need to be executed with least privileges. If these actions are executing with administrative privileges, there is a chance of taking complete compromise of the system, so by the attacker. So this is the about injection flaws. If any questions, so I will be happy to answer. Can I go ahead?
Venkatesh, at the end of the session, they can have questions.
Yes, yes. Okay, sir. Yes, coming to the next category, broken authentication and session management. In this, application functions related to authentication and session management are often implemented incorrectly, allowing attackers to compromise passwords, keys, or session tokens, or to exploit other implementation flaws to assume other users' identities temporarily or permanently. In this, the authorized user only need to allow to access the authorized resources. So for this only, many web applications are implementing login forms and other methods for authenticating the who is trying to log in, authenticating the user who is trying to log in by using some username, password, or some other mechanism, biometrics or some cryptographic keys or some each and every session. So session tokens will be available. All these are various authentication mechanisms and managing sessions for a particular user. So this means verifying the validity of the user with the provided user credentials. And these sessions are used to keep track of the stream of requests from a single user. So this is actually this session management is not provided by the HTTP protocol itself, and web developers has to create develop this kind of session management mechanism in their application. In this, the attack vectors have, so the attackers easily can exploit this kind of vulnerability by using credential stuffing, default administrative account list. Like sometimes developers use very hard-coded passwords, or sometimes they use very default user values like admin or admin password, or very weak passwords, so which are easily available in dictionaries, something like that, dictionary words. So by using this kind of credential stuffing and default administrative credentials, automated brute force attacks and dictionary attacks, so the attacker can easily, by using this kind of tools, attacker can easily identify this kind of vulnerabilities, and attackers can prepare his attack strategy accordingly. The broken authentication is a widespread due to the design and implementation of most identity and access controls. Session is the key element of authentication and access controls and is present in all stateful applications. So the typical impact of this session management, broken authentication and session management vulnerability is the session may be hijacked, or some the attacker may perform some confidential transactions on behalf of the user. So So broken authentication we can just see in pictorial representation in this. So the user sends credentials to the code, web application code. So in that, the URL, by using URL rewriting mechanism, some session URL, that's in that session URL, it is keeping some session ID. The user clicks on that link. So where the attacker is just keeping that link. So then immediately the hacker can hijack this session and do transactions on behalf of the user. In this, why the web application having this kind of weaknesses? It permits automated attacks such as credential surfing, where the attacker has a list of valid usernames and passwords. If the web application is allowing to run this kind of tools, so where credential stuffing and brute forcing attacks, then automatically the web application is vulnerable and attacker may exploit this. And default weak well-known passwords. This is another kind of weakness in where the attacker can bypass this authentication mechanism established in the web application. And these are the countermeasures for this broken authentication and session management. Implement multi-factor authentication, where like nowadays many organizations running their web application using multi-factor authentication only. So in the first stage they are authenticating by using username and password for any user. After that, in the second stage they are authenticating using some OTP or some other hardware tokens. And most of the applications, they are not using any default credentials. If and enforcing password policy, like some password policy should be there, which defines the password must contain some defined length, like some 15 characters or 18 characters, and that password should contain all sorts of different uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. And the password should be changed every 3 months or 6 months. Some period is defined in the policy. And each and every application nowadays testing the weak password checks also. That means if you are just trying to create some passwords, and it will say it is strong, weak, or highly strong, very strong, like that. And if suppose if some multiple failed attempts are there, that should also be prevented. That should be restricted by the web application at some threshold, like 3 attempts. So that should be blocked. So some built-in session manager at the server side to keep track of all the sessions of a particular user till the end of that session. Or if once successful login, and I am leaving that session idle for some time, then that session should be automatically log out. So timeout should be defined. So as a countermeasure for this broken authentication and session management, so developers can mitigate this kind of attacks by following these kind of countermeasures. And coming to cross-site scripting, this is another kind of vulnerability, and it's a very popular and prevalent vulnerability. Here, this cross-site scripting, also called as XSS, this flaw occurs whenever an application includes untrusted data in a new web page without proper validation, or escaping or updates an existing web page with user supplied data using a browser. So in this, that means whenever user supplying any data, so that data should not be directly updated on the browser. So if it is doing so, then that application is vulnerable to this cross-site scripting attacks. And proper validation mechanisms should be used by the developer. If there is no validation or there is no sanitation of the user supplied input, that will automatically directly interpreted by the server. And sometimes the data, or the whatever the data supplied by the user, may be stored in the database, and later it will be retrieved and executed by the interpreter. In this, HTML or JavaScript this the code inserted by attacker maybe in the form of HTML or JavaScript or some other commands we have already discussed in the injection flaws. So in the similar way, in this the vector for this cross-site scripting attack is automated tools. Automated tools are used to detect and exploit these different types of cross-site scripting attacks. The main categories of these cross-site scripting attacks are reflected, persistent, and document object model based. In the reflected accesses, the vulnerable application simply reflects the attacker's code to its visitors. Suppose if I am using I am browsing some website, and in that one form is there. If I am submitting some code, so that code will be reflected to me. So it affects the user only, and whatever the impact is there to the user. So, and coming to persistent, this vulnerable web application where this vulnerability exists. So it stores the user supplied data, either command or code or iframe, whatever. It will store it in the database. So whenever that code is called, so whenever the data is called, so the application server will retrieve the data from the database and execute that code present to the user. And in document object model based, in this vulnerability, the pages that use untrusted parts of the document object model like document.location. So if I am just specifying some location in this document object model, so the server will execute or redirect my request to the location where it is located, or if I am giving some URL, it will redirect to that URL in any secure way. Here, the attacker injects malicious code into the vulnerable web server, and victim visits that vulnerable web server. Malicious code is served to the server, and malicious code execute on the victim with the web browser privileges. In this, the typical impact with this cross-site scripting attacks are stealing of sensitive information, re-rating of web page with the user supplied content, and redirecting user to some other malicious websites. And a more severe impact by using XSS proxy, which allows attackers to observe and direct all user behavior to vulnerable website. This reflected on the DOM-based vulnerabilities are moderately critical, and persistent is very highly critical, because whatever the data or command or code supplied by the malicious user will be stored in the database, and the data will be retrieved and executed. It may affect the complete compromise of the system as well. So you have already some session already happened like web shells. So sometimes if the remote attacker insert shell in the database by using this vulnerability persistent cross-site scripting, later that web shell maybe get executed, and it will give complete control of the server and the other infrastructure as well, so to the attacker. So what are the countermeasures now? So this is another attack scenario where, so just with some example where some page, so with some string just in the HTML snippet. So the code is constructing like that. In that input name, the name is that credit card variable name, and the text value is, it will take a text value, and the value is taken from the user request.get parameter. So in that credit code number will be there. That parameter will be supplied to the input name credit card. In that, the credit code in that parameter, if the attacker including this script http attacker.com cjbin/cookie dot and document.cookie. So that means here the attacker is stealing the current active cookie data from the browser. So the current existing session ID. So by using that session ID, the attacker later may perform activities or transaction on behalf of the currently logged in user. So this is the way we can just explain this Crosssite scripting, this thing. So here, suppose if you are visiting some forms or blogs, the attacker may put some trap on the web page, and if user clicks on that attacker page or something, so then their background, some hidden frame, if you assume some hidden frame was placed there, it is not visible directly on the page. And if the user clicks on that iframe or whatever the link provided there, it will automatically, the session of the user will be hijacked, and he may redirect to some other website also. And these are the countermeasures for cross-site scripting attacks. So in this, never insert untrusted data except in allowed locations. So whenever taking any user supplied data, that data need to be clearly verified and validated. Then only that need to be concatenated with any of the query string while developing that code of the web application. And after taking the user supplied data, that need to be sanitized by using these escaping characters available in HTML, JavaScript, or cascading style sheets. By using the strings, the user supplied data can be sanitized and modified. Thereafter, that can be given to the interpreter to process it. And URL escaping mechanism also can be used, where the parameter value should not be displayed directly in the HTML URL. And HTML markup with library designed for this job. Some existing libraries also available, and JavaScript URLs also actually many of applications use it to use, and those should be avoided. Coming to next category of vulnerability, that is broken access control. In this access control means the user, whatever the application, so whoever want to utilize the services of that application will be controlled by using some access control mechanisms. So in this, like authenticated users will be allowed by using some authentication mechanisms. So restrictions on what authenticated users are allowed to do are often not properly enforced. If these access control mechanisms are not properly enforced, then unauthorized users may access some restricted resources or privileged resources. So attackers can exploit these vulnerabilities, such as accessing other users' accounts or sensitive files, or to modify other user data, or change access rights of the some files. So these kind of issues may arise if the user is not authenticated properly. These access control weaknesses are very common due to lack of automated detection and lack of effective functional testing by application developers at the time of development. The typical impact of this broken access control vulnerability is attacker act as a user or administrator, or users using privileged functions are creating, accessing, updating, or detecting every record. In this, due to lack of proper functionality testing, these access control vulnerabilities exist in many of the web applications. So this access control is a core skill for attackers, where they can by using source code analysis security tools or dynamic analysis security tools, they can easily detect the absence of access control mechanisms in the web application. This can be detected by using manual methods as well. So if any person with malicious intention can easily identify whether the access control mechanisms have implemented properly or not. If he finds there is no access control or proper access control, then he can very easily try to exploit that vulnerability. These are all some example attack scenarios where the authentication access control is bypassed. In this, if you see that prepared statement query, so in that, So there are two parameters are there. One is already some fixed value, and another parameter taken from the user or URL. Request.get parameter, URL parameter. So with the value, no, with the parameter name account. And at the time of executing that result set results prepared statement execute query, that is a syntax for a prepared statement execution. In this, if I am just with my account number is 1, if I am using by giving 1, then I can get my result. If I am trying with a different account number, so that application should not allow me to access other users account details. So if it is allowing by just replacing the account value in the URL, whatever it is delivered to me or supplied to me. So if I'm trying to change that URL value, so then immediately if it is giving the value, that I could be able to see other users as well, other user details as well. In a similar way, so get application information. This is one one key parameter where it will give the application details, information, background details about the application. So in similar way, if I am guessing something like admin also having some information which is available without authenticating my the user, then I can try by guessing this admin underscore get app info. So with the person with malicious intention or the attacker can easily guess this kind of details on what kind of various pages or information easily available in the documentation. So those things can easily available by changing the URL parameters and submitting. The server will process the request and send as a response to the attacker, and attacker will easily know the various background configurations and various other details on what are the databases are available, what are the tables, and which version of system is there, and various by using the banner information. All these details are very easily available if that application not developed with proper access control mechanisms. And these are various countermeasures for mitigating this vulnerability, access control, broken access control. In this, avoid exposing your private object references to users whenever possible. So if that any object is easily visible in the URL, so any attacker can easily try to change that reference with other different number which is not having access to that object. So, so that means the object references and the whatever the parameter value displaying on the URL should be modified or mapped to different objects or some IDs. Meanwhile, those are able to predict object IDs or names. That object IDs and names should not be predictable, and it need to be uh, manipulated in a different way where attackers or any malicious person cannot predict that. Verify user authorization each time sensitive objects or files or contents are accessed. And every time, suppose once I have already successfully logged in, and later, so if I am trying to access some other different account details or some other parameters, I should be re-authenticated or need to be authorized every time whenever I am trying to access any sensitive objects or other files which I am not supposed to access. And use an indirect reference map to create alternate IDs or name for server-side object. Like whatever the server is maintaining the data, and each and every object should have a mapped ID which is not showing in the URL, or which is not possible to guess or identify or discovered by the attacker. And coming to next, security misconfiguration. In this vulnerability, some common server configuration issues are there. So if the server settings are not properly configured, and that may become a huge security loophole, and that may cause to hijack the website or web application or the server by the hacker. In this, unpatched security flaws in the server software, and whatever the server software the developer uses, it need to be patched with the latest updates. And improper file and directory permissions, and whatever the directories available in the application, and whatever the files available, and each and every file and directory should be allowed to access with the proper permissions, like read write access in Linux. So those permissions need to be configured properly. And if any unnecessary services are running on the web server, like FTP service or some other mail service or some other services, by default, if you see some bundled web applications or some content management systems nowadays, content management systems are very popular, where everything is readily available. Very easily we can just install and run the web application very easily. In that case, various unnecessary modules which are not required for current application are also running. In the similar way, FTP is also running, or some other service is also running. Though all those services need to be identified, and whether the service is really required, then only that service need to be enabled. And remote administration applications also, we need to just see whether it is properly configured or not, if it is absolutely required. And what are the default accounts and the default passwords come with the bundle, like many other applications are there. Many organizations use it to use this application like XAMPP, LAMP, and some other applications like cross-platform coming with Apache, MySQL, PHP MyAdmin, and PHP. With all this, whatever the applications or softwares are required for running any web application, all those are coming in a bundle. So such kind of tools or this application having so default accounts, like for PHP MyAdmin, for managing all these databases running in the application. So all those things having a default accounts, which is those accounts username and password are freely available, publicly available on the net. So those accounts and those credentials need to be changed. And overly informative error messages. Sometimes whenever some error occurring, like 500 server error, in that case, so the server completely throw the exception in case of the website is developed in Java or some other .NET applications. It will throw complete error which contains what kind of function it is, and what activity it is doing, what are the various parameters in this, and which the line number the code is located, and what is the internal architecture. Based on the error message, so attackers can very easily discover a lot of useful information to craft an attack on the websites. The typical impact of this security misconfiguration vulnerability is, so the complete system or application can compromise with this kind of vulnerability. And what are the countermeasures for this mitigating this misconfiguration vulnerabilities? So configuring all security mechanisms, including application, underlying web server, database server, and any other consoles or any other modules used in the content management system. Turning off all unused services. Whatever the services we need to enable those services only, and whatever other services which are running, so those services need to be stopped. And setting up roles, permissions, and accounts, including disable all default accounts or changing their passwords. Logging and alerts. Every attempt should be logged. So that logging should be enabled by the developer or administrator, web administrator. So based on logging, we can the administrator can easily notice if any particular error attempts or failed attempts are having any traces, like trying to hack this website, trying to capture some information which is confidential in nature. Such kind of things can be easily identified. So applying the latest security patches at OS level, database management system level, web server level, and even libraries also. Some, if any third party libraries if used in the application. Those libraries also need to be updated with up-to-date patches. And regular vulnerability scanning from both internal and external perspective. So regular vulnerability scanning will help to identify what are the current existing vulnerabilities, and is there any new vulnerabilities introduced because of the change of code in some page, change of code by the developer. And coming to next vulnerability, there's sensitive data exposure. In the sensitive data means mostly the passwords or credit card numbers and some other personally identifiable information which need to be protected very securely by using some encryption. So while transmitting this data between client and server, or if the data is stored at some database by using some hash values, so those data also need to be secured if it is containing this kind of sensitive data. This kind of vulnerability exists with majorly in financial services or some other e-commerce applications, and some other applications which are dealing the confidential data like user data, like Aadhaar card numbers or some other details, so which is personally identifiable. So identifying or authenticating some person by using that data, either username or password or some number, social security number, something like that. These details need to be securely processed and stored, and need to be secured in transmission as well by using some encryption mechanisms. These are all. So major issues arise from this handling sensitive data is sometimes data may not be encrypted while transit or while in rest, or insecure uses of strong algorithms. Developers use strong algorithms, but those algorithms will be used in an insecure way. And proven weak algorithms used to use for doing this encryption or for protecting this data. And key management, if the encryption keys are not secured properly, and if that key is leaked and a complete encryption algorithm is broken, so the typical impact is the sensitive information will be disclosed public to the unauthorized users. And countermeasures for this kind of vulnerability. So ensure critical data is encrypted everywhere it is stored long term, including backups of this data. The data, whatever you're feeling it's a sensitive and it contains personal identifiable information that need to be encrypted. So while in transit, as well as if you are keeping the transactions in a backup like logs. So in financial transactions, logs contain some sensitive information. Those logs also need to be stored in a backup in a protected way. Strong encryption algorithms need to be used, and the keys should be properly managed. These are the various countermeasures for mitigating the sensitive data exposure kind of vulnerabilities exist in the web applications. Sir?
Yes, sir.
So should I continue, because time, see
Still, how many slides you have?
Hello?
Still, how many slides you have?
Some 10-15 slides are there, or I can skip these slides and go to that how to set up this environment for just trying this.
Yeah, that will be better.
Yeah. So only 3-4 slides are there in that how to set up this server and client machine and this. And this another this vulnerability is Crosssite record forgery. It exploits the trust in between the client and browser. So in this the browser trust, once the other user is authenticated and session is created, and user think that the user is doing transactions by using that valid session ID. But in between, if the user visit any other website where malicious links or malicious code is embedded, and that user clicking by while doing this sensitive transaction, and user visiting some other website where the attacker specially crafted and created some page which is not directly visible, and if user clicking on any of the link, then immediately, as like I have already shown earlier, if some session hijacking code is embedded in any web page where the user visiting that web page, and the user is immediately uh, redirected to that page, malicious page, and attacker hijack the session, and he will do transactions on behalf of the user. This you can easily just see how the CSRF attacks are working. So here the attacker is already having a login, the user is already having a login session, and the user is trying to access some attacker page where some image was embedded which is not visible directly, and behind that image some hidden code might be there, and if user clicking that code, and the attacker will easily execute his intended code for hijacking that session, and the attacker will hijack the session, and he will do send a request on behalf of the user, and the server will trust that the valid user or authenticated user is sending that request, and the server will process that request. These are all countermeasures. This presentation I will share with organizers, and that you may just refer later. Components with known vulnerabilities, like some various third-party components were used to use in developing web applications, and those components need to be, we need to understand, the developer need to understand what kind of component he is using and what are the known vulnerabilities are there, and whether those vulnerabilities have been addressed or not. If it is not addressed, better to prefer not to use such kind of components which are having very known vulnerabilities publicly in a vulnerability database. And because these vulnerabilities can be easily discovered by using automated tools by the attackers. So identify the component and all the dependencies also. Identify the component and their versions you are using, including all dependencies, and monitor the security of these components in public databases. Project manual is something like that, because this is publicly available. The vulnerability details and everything is publicly available. The attacker discover that this component is used and this version is used, and they can very easily craft an attack to compromise the system. These are another vulnerability: unvalidated redirects and forwards. So if the request is not properly uh, validated or processed, then the user may unknowingly redirect to some malicious websites, like forwarding also. Suppose if the attacker using some iframe in the web page, maliciously crafted web page, and if the user is visiting that page and he unknowingly uh, redirecting or forwarding to the malicious website where some malware may be downloaded to the user, and the user system get infected. This is the illustration of this unvalidated redirect or forwards, and this is a forward, how the user is unknowingly forwarding to some malicious website. This is the few countermeasures for mitigating this unvalidated redirects and forwards. And insufficient logging and monitoring. this vulnerability in this. With this existing vulnerability, this is a very popular attack
Presentation
website.
stop. Please share your screen again.
This is a website compromise malware propagation incident where we use it to see very regularly by using any of the previously discussed vulnerabilities. Attacker use it to compromise a web application and host some malicious scripts, and those scripts will redirect users to. So this the major top organizations websites are target for this kind of attacks, where the attacker will host some script or web page which unknowingly redirect the visitors to the malicious websites. This is the mechanism in this attack. And web application firewall is the one stop solution to prevent various kind of attacks. But still, this web application firewall can be bypassed by using various mechanisms by the attackers if the application contains vulnerabilities, which we have already previously discussed. These are the various benefits where it can protect from various web application attacks. Zero-day vulnerabilities also it can prevent, and it will increase the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the web application. And now, so actually for practicing this, all exploiting these vulnerabilities and how this can be executed. So I will give them the procedure how to create a setup for doing this web and vulnerability assessment or penetration testing by using a closely prepared setup. In this, in your host machine, you can install VMware or that means virtual machine management software, or VMware Player or Virtual Box, which is available from Oracle in your host machine, and you can create a virtual machine which is of a server software for hosting a web application by using either Windows Server, Linux server, and create another machine, as many machines as you need as a clients, by using any of the desktop operating system, or by using this ethical hacking operating system like Kali Linux. Earlier it is called as Backtrack, so which is having all these required tools and exploit codes. Everything is available, which you can utilize and leverage the attack on the test server. So this establish a network between this server and client by using a local network configuration kind of thing. So, and you can test the web application vulnerabilities. So in this is an example configuration I'm giving it to you to make it as a local local LAN. So you can install in the VMware machine that operating system, and use some private address and configure XAMPP. So I'm using XAMPP here. So that's a class platform. It can work in Windows, Mac, or Linux, any operating system. It comes with Apache web server, MySQL database, and PHP MyAdmin for controlling the databases, and PHP the platform for developing the web application. And you can use DVWA, that is damn vulnerable web application. No need to develop any of the application. There are several vulnerable web applications are available that web application directly you can host on the server, and you can run the web server by using this XAMPP control panel. And in the client machine, you can use Kali for easy availability of all the penetration testing tools. So in that you can use the local configurations, and you can access that website by using this configuration and try executing the commands. And you can assess the vulnerabilities by using this kind of testing environment as well. And these are the various vulnerable web applications are available. These are the resources, and DW, Google Glare, Utility, and OS Juice Shop, and WebGoat. These are various projects are available which are developing vulnerable web applications, and they are providing freely. And that we can take that web application and host at our test environment. And this is the conclusion for my session. And secure coding practices and secure configurations will address most of the vulnerabilities which I have already discussed to keep the web applications secure. And vulnerability assessment and penetration testing will help in identifying the existing vulnerabilities before hosting for the public. So this the identified vulnerabilities can be fixed by the developer, and later the updated version of the application can be hosted for the public to avoid many of the basic vulnerabilities. And periodic review of the web application, periodic review and assessment of the web application for vulnerabilities is always helpful to find the new vulnerabilities introduced due to various configuration changes or code changes in the application. Thank you so much. You can post your queries or any doubts to my email. So I'm happy to answer your queries.
So we'll wait for 5 minutes and we'll
Yes.
see if anybody want to put any doubts in the chat box, or if anybody want to speak, I can unmute.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So dear participants, chat box is open now. You can pose any questions, or if you want to talk, you can talk. I can unmute.
Sir, we have a question from Dr. Sayed.
Mhm.
Which certification program is best for cybersecurity? What type of certification programs you did?
There are many certification programs are available. So like a very basic level certification program like CH, Certified Ethical Hacker. So from AC Council, that is they are just giving this certification. CISSP, Certified Information System Security Professional, or Offensive Security Certified Professional, OSCP. So these are various major certified programs are there. I am the certified ethical hacker and penetration tester from Global Information Security Certification from USA. So any more questions? Thank you.
Santosh Kumar, you want to talk?
Yeah.
Santosh Kumar, you can talk. Santosh Kumar.
Hi.
Hello, Santosh Kumar. You can unmute yourself. I think that hand raise was an accident.
Okay. Okay, sir. So
Thank you, Venkateswara, for your wonderful session, and
sir, thank you so much,
like
sir.
a slow and steady kind of PPT. Our participants are very happy to hear you.
Sir.
So we want more collaborative work from CERTIN and CDAT. And for the participants' information, I'm telling most of the experts in this webinar series are live, provided us by VV Rao. So
Sir.
he is in CERTIN. He is having so many contacts with CDAT people and CERTIN people. So because of his help only, we could organize this big webinar series. So academicians we could gather, but all these CDAC scientists and certain scientists, because of his help only, we could get all these people. So we thank you very much from the organizing committee and UCV and JNTUV Kakinada.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving this opportunity. We are always be there with you. So in future also we can just deliver this kind of sessions as and when required. So, and I will be happy to answer if any one want to have any query and question or anything. So you can mail to me, or you can drop me a message as well. So thank you once again, everyone, for listening to me very patiently. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnes.
So we'll end the session.
Thank you, sir.